Good evening. It's our Old Testament time here at Cleveland Community Chapel. Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Ecclesiastes, or the preacher, some Bibles call this book, but most of them say Ecclesiastes. Chapter 9, just 18 verses, so it'll be quick. Solomon is still, as king, I guess, sitting around and observing the world and contemplating. He's being a philosopher. And he's looking all over the place under the sun. He says, here's how I see it. And that's where we're still working through his little experiments and the way that he sees things. Good news is he'll finally get it straightened out in the last chapter, but he's still going to tell us, here's how I see it. Verse 1, chapter 9. For all this, I considered in my heart. I'm thinking about things. He said, I considered in my heart, even to declare all this, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God. No man knoweth either love or hatred by all that's before them, and all things come alike to all. He says, I've sat around and looked, and he says, he's going to say, same thing happens to everybody. You live a while and life's rough, and then you die. That's under the sun. See, he's not remembering to look above the sun yet. All things come alike to all, verse 2. There's one event. And it's the main event. It's one event happens to everybody. It's death. The one event to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good and the clean, to the unclean, to him that sacrifices, to him that sacrifices. Now, it don't matter if you're clean or if you're unclean. It don't seem to matter if you go to church and worship, sacrifice or not sacrifice, or not go to church. The same thing happens to everybody. You die and they put you in a hole in the ground because he can't see past so far in his writing beyond everything under the sun. And as to the good, so is to the sinner. He that swears to hear the fearsome, this is an evil among all things that are done under the sun. I've looked around and he said, this is a great injustice. Of all the things on this planet, he said, here's the worst injustice of all that I've seen. He says, it don't matter how good you are, how bad you are. It don't matter if you go to church, if you don't go to church. He says, in the end, you died and they put you in a hole in the ground. That's as far as he could see. There's one event unto all. Yea, also the heart of the sons of men is full of evil. That's one thing he said I've noticed. I've sort of noticed that too. Jesus said the same thing here. And madness is in their heart while they live. And after that, they go to the dead. And see, he couldn't see beyond the grave in this point of the story. For to him that's joined to all the living, there's hope. He says, as long as you're alive, you can hope. Then he says a statement that's often quoted still today, and people don't know it's a biblical thing, but actually Solomon said it. You ever heard anybody say, I'd rather be a living dog than a dead lion? And that started with Solomon here. For a living dog's better than a dead lion. As long as I'm alive, at least I'm alive, right? I'd rather be a living dog than a dead lion. For the living know that they shall die. Now, I know that. I hope you know that. But it's funny, there's a lot of people today that are living like they don't know that they're going to die, and you're going to have to answer to God one of these days. For the living know that they shall die. And he says, but the dead know not anything. Well, see, he's not seeing there is something beyond this life. He's saying once you're dead, Solomon's just looking under the sun. He says, just once you're dead, you cease to have any kind of mental brain function or anything. And the New Testament teaches us that, yeah, you do, that your soul leaves this body, and to be absent from this body is to be present with the Lord. So you're still going to have, we find out even you have your memory. Remember in Luke chapter 18, the rich man and Lazarus, 16 or 18, 16 I believe. And that the wicked guy goes to hell, and he's having a conversation across the great gulf with Father Abraham, and he's saying, send somebody back to my brother's house. Warn them. I've got 5 brothers. Warn them not to come to this place. And Father Abraham says, now, son, remember, in your days, you had it good, and Lazarus here had it bad, but now Lazarus, he's on the good side and you're on the bad side. But he goes on to tell that guy too, says, they've got Moses and the prophets, your brothers. If they won't listen to them, they wouldn't even hear if one rose from the dead. If they won't listen to what the Bible has to tell them, they won't listen to anybody else. And Solomon, he don't have that view yet in our writing. He just those, the living are going to die and the dead don't know nothing. Neither have they any more a reward. For the memory of them is forgotten. I've noticed Solomon wrote this several times. By the time we get to chapter 9, he's worried about being remembered after he dies. And little did he know that much of his writings in Proverbs and Song of Solomon and Ecclesiastes, these things are eternally preserved in the Word of God. Nobody will ever forget Solomon, but many of us, they will. Give it a generation or so, nobody will remember you anymore. But that's all right. We know that there's another world besides the one that's under the sun. There's one beyond the sun. Also their love and their hatred and their envy is now perished with them. Neither have they any more a portion forever in anything that's done under the sun. Go thy way. Here's how Solomon just looks at all this stuff and depressed and says there's no justice in this world. And maybe he's right in this world, but there's another world. So he just comes to the conclusion the best thing he can do is just eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow you die. Go your way, eat with joy, drink with the wine with a merry heart, for God now accepts your works. And Jesus said, Paul actually wrote this. He said, now is a big word in the Bible. It says, now is the accepted time that God will accept your repentant faith now and today, while it's called, don't boast yourself of tomorrow. James adds to it, for you don't know what a day may bring forth. Actually, that's Solomon, I think, in Proverbs. James says, don't boast yourself of tomorrow without saying, Lord willing. Let thy garments be always white, let thy head lack no ornament. Verse 9. Live joyfully with the wife whom you lovest all the days of your life of vanity. Solomon's just saying, you might as well live it up, eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy life all the days of this empty world, which he's given you under the sun. All the days of thy vanity, for that is your portion in this life, and in thy labor which thou takest under the sun. You might as well live it up, because this life's all there is in his writing right now, see? Whatsoever your hand finds to do it with all your might. That's a good motto and good philosophy. Whatever you apply yourself to do it to be the best you can at. Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. But Solomon's reasoning was because there ain't going to be nothing else. There's no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave where thou goest. Live it up here, because you're going to the grave, and you can't do nothing then. You and I know there's something beyond the grave. Solomon ain't got there in this part of the story yet, though. He says in verse 11, I returned and I saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill, but time and chance. That's all it is. Just time and chance happens to them all. For man also knows not his time, as the fishes that are taken in an evil or cruel net, and as the birds that are caught in the snare. We're just trapped in this life, headed for the slaughter. So are the sons of men snared in an evil time, when it falls suddenly upon them. Now see, I know the rest of the story. I know that there's a way to escape this evil net that we call life down here. We're going to escape this evil world one of these days, Christians. Thanks be to Jesus. Verse 13, this wisdom have I seen also under the sun, and it seems great to me. Here's some great wisdom he's come up. Of all the things he's philosophized. You know what I'm trying to say. All the things he's thought about. He says, here's the wise thing I've come up with. He's going to give us a little proverb, first of all. There was a little city and few men within it, and there came a great king against it, and besieged it, and built a great bulwarks against it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man in this city, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no man remembered that same poor man. See, Solomon's concerned about him being remembered. Then said I, he said, wisdom's better than strength. That's true, ain't it? That's why the pen is mightier than the sword. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom's despised, and his words are not heard. I think he is feeling sorry for himself. People don't listen to me like they should anymore. Well, Solomon, you're in good country, good company there, because Jesus was the wisest man that there's ever been, and people won't even come to church and hear his words anymore. The words of the wise men are heard in quiet more than the cry of him that rules among the fools. Now there's a verse for today. Let's read that. The words of wise men are heard in quiet more than the cry of him that rules among the fools. Well, it ought to be that way, but you and I are living in a time when people would rather hear the ones who are ruling among the fools, that would be the politicians. People would rather listen to what the politicians have got to say than what the preachers have got to say today, wouldn't they? Wisdom is better than weapons of war. That's true. And this is true too. This Solomon just sitting around observing life from his throne. And he says, I've observed this. One sinner destroys much good. And that's the truth. Don't be that one. See you next time.